Guys, this isn't the exact stream that I was looking forward to making. I don't know if you guys pay much attention to Ray Dalio. He's one of the guys that I look to the most when it comes to the macro economy. Warren Buffett, everyone knows Warren Buffett. Every good investor knows Warren Buffett, but he looks to the micro. He looks to individual companies and which ones are selling for cheap, which ones have a lot of potential to earn a lot of money at a good price. Ray Dalio, he's also an investor. He also does a little bit of micro investing, but what he's known for the most is macro investing, forecasting what's going to happen in the macro economic world. Is there going to be higher inflation? Is cash, what's going to happen to cash? What's going to happen to the world economy? Is there going to be another war? Actually, that's one thing that he's been talking about, another war. So he issued a tweet, a short form tweet, which led on to a long form LinkedIn article stating that we're another step towards international war. Let's read it. Let's read through the article. So what happened and is happening between Israel and Hamas, like what happened and is happening between Ukraine and Russia, should raise revulsion and fear in everyone. Never really like it when people say we should have revulsion and fear. That's not my attitude. I don't like to be a fearful person, but that is true both because these conflicts reveal the unimaginable, terrible, and revolting ways people can and do treat other people, especially innocent civilians. So he's referring to those videos that came out on Twitter and other parts of the internet of horrific crimes that I don't want to talk about, really. And because no one anywhere can be sure that they won't someday find themselves in some horrible war. So by the way, for everyone who's in a peaceful nation like I am, I just feel so happy and so grateful to be in a country where, I can go to sleep easy at night, and I know there's not going to be any war coming my way anytime soon, so I feel very grateful. While Israel, Hamas, Ukraine, and Russia are in hot wars, thankfully the major powers, the US and China, are not. Yeah, I would hate. Imagine, the US and China, the two most powerful countries in the world, being at war with all the might and power and money behind those countries. In a hot war, that would end very badly. Though they remain at the brink of one. It appears that we are at a very critical juncture in which we will soon see if the Israel-Hamas war spreads and how far it spreads, and longer term, whether the great powers are forces for peace and will back away from the brink of direct conflict or get involved and cross the brink. So he's talking about the big powers, US and China. Are they going to encourage peace and some sort of solution between these smaller countries who are fighting, or are they going to get involved? Are they going to send military equipment? Are they going to send their people, their civilians across to fight in a war? Hopefully not. I really hope not. Hopefully, the horrific and tragic images we are all seeing will encourage restraint. However, it is very likely the case that the images of civilian casualties we are seeing now and will see during an escalating war in Gaza will lead to new conflicts between countries and within countries, e.g. repulsive violence against Jewish and Muslim populations in many countries. In my opinion, this war has a high risk of leading to several other conflicts of different types in a number of places, and is likely to have harmful effects that will extend beyond those in Israel and Gaza. Well, I really do hope that it sticks to just those two countries, man. We don't need war in bigger nations and other nations. This is my opinion. I think it's pretty much everyone's opinion. Let's continue. Primarily for those reasons, it appears to me that the odds of transitioning from the contained conflicts to a more uncontained hot world war that includes the major powers have risen from about 35% to about 50% over the last 2 years since I wrote my book, Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order. So, for those who don't know, Dalio wrote this book, Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order, where he kind of says, at some stage, maybe sooner than later, we are going to get a change in the world order, which the current world order is the USA are at the top, and they've set the rules for how the world works and the laws, and they've got the reserve currency, and the USA are at the top. But Dalio sees this pattern where there's another coming country that are getting bigger and bigger and more powerful, where they might overtake the USA and then make a new world order, which I wouldn't be a big fan of. And I don't think most people would. China at the top of the pecking order, dictating the rules. So that's crazy though. 50% chance of uncontained hot world war. That's a big statement to make. A hot world war, I'm pretty sure, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but basically that's when it's direct contact on contact, it's fighting, it's bombing, it's shooting. Let's just double check that, hot world war. Because you can get I don't know what they call, you can get economic wars where, you tax one country more, or you don't allow the imports of one country, or, those are different types of war. But a hot war is when it's direct conflict. Pretty sure on that definition. Human conflict with destructive attacks on physical infrastructure and peoples. Open warfare. So yeah, it's just open warfare. Now that is... I don't know if I agree with Dalio on this. A 50% chance of open warfare between the major powers? How does that work? Because we all know the USA is quite involved in this Israel-Gaza situation, but China's not really doing much, are they? So how's this meant to escalate a hot war between, China and USA? I don't get it. And I don't think, my opinion, I don't think there's a 50% chance of a hot war coming anytime soon. Maybe I'm just a naive optimist, but I do think sometimes when people get a bit older, they become a bit more fearful when they think, well, I'm going to die soon, and they kind of assume, oh, there's going to be bad things happening in the war. Like only a few days ago, I was listening to some older gentleman saying, oh, I do think we're in the end times. And I've heard this so many times from so many, different sort of older people. So this is my opinion. I don't think there's 50% chance, but we're not talking too much about my opinion. Who cares about my opinion? Let's talk Dalio. So let's keep going. In today's post, I describe how I see what is happening within the context of how these sorts of things have repeatedly played out in the past. So I also will make another suggestion for what leaders can do to move towards a better world, i.e. a more broadly prosperous and peaceful world. Well, maybe just grow the economy instead of growing wars, or just saying let's focus on peace, let's focus on sport, let's focus on productive things instead of fighting. But I'll be interested to see what Dalio has to say. Actually, I've already read this article, not gonna lie, but let's continue. And by the way, one of the things Dalio is really good at is looking at what happened in the past, in other nations, the rise and fall of other nations. He studied this back, I believe, 500 years in the past, and he saw, how did countries start growing? How did empires start falling? And then he looked at the patterns, he looked at the different things that were involved, and he's using this to predict what is going to happen in the future. And one of the best videos, maybe on YouTube, maybe I'm being exaggerating a bit, but is Ray Dalio talking about the changing world order. This video is so good, just learning about what happened to prior empires in the past. How did the Dutch currency grow and then fall? How did Britain grow and then fall? What's happening with USA? Why did they grow so well, but why are they starting to collapse now? This video, and he explains things so well and so simply, and the animations are so good. I was watching this last night. If you get some spare time, and if you stop watching, like Mr. Beast or whatever else is all on YouTube, this video, man, is a great one to watch. But let's continue with the article. Why does he think there's a 50% chance of a hot war between major superpowers? Coffee break. So, how these things transpire. Based on how and why conflicts between countries have typically played out in history, and based on logical assessment of what is happening now, it seems clear that one, these two wars, the Israel-Hamas war and the Russia-Ukraine war, reflect these four sides crossing the lines between contained pre-hot war conflicts to uncontained hot wars that will be brutal until the end, which will probably not be until one side clearly defeats the other. I hope not, but he's probably right. And two, these types of brutal wars are more likely to spread than subside. These two hot wars make clear how horrific hot wars are if they spread to other countries. Most importantly, the major countries. Of course, we don't want these hot wars in the major countries, because the major countries influence how the whole world goes. And if the major countries get involved in wars, then the other little countries, like even peaceful ones like New Zealand and Australia and whatnot, then they are expected to get involved as well. So that's how you get that world war. Dalio says, I hope that the emerging picture of what this would look like will encourage restraint at this critical juncture of being on the brink. Sometimes you look at the leaders though and you're like, do they have what it takes to restrain themselves? I hope so too, Ray Dalio. Guys, I read this part here and I don't think it's that important. I want to continue to this part here. Based on the perspective I've gained from studying history and from my over 50 years of experiences betting on what's likely to happen, it seems to me that the Israel-Hamas war is another classic, unfortunate step towards a more violent and encompassing international war. In other words, it's part of a larger war dynamic. Anyone who has studied history and is watching what is going on should be concerned about, one, these conflicts moving from being contained to being all-out brutal wars that continue until the other side is clearly defeated, and two, these conflicts spreading to involve more countries. Of course, in order to gain perspective on how these pre-war stages in the big cycle unfold, I suggest that you study other pre-war periods, such as those in the 2 years prior to World War I and II in both Europe and Asia. What is happening now sure looks like that. So I haven't studied what happened in World War I and World War II. What happened before these wars actually took place? I don't know. I wasn't there. I'm an idiot. I haven't even studied it in high school or anything like that. In high school, I wasn't focused that much on education. But what was it like? You know, were they having tough economic times? Was there an economic war going on, a trade war going on before? What were they talking like? What was education like? What was the propaganda like? I don't know. I haven't studied it. Maybe Dalio will let us know a little bit in this article. But one thing I do know was there was a lot of extreme talk going on before the wars. Obviously you had Hitler, who was, being very aggressive, and a lot of hateful things were being said. So that's certainly something that goes on before a war takes place. What is happening? When Hamas attacked Israel, like when Russia attacked Ukraine, there was a classic, irreversible transition from the pre-hot war part of the cycle to the hot war part of the cycle. As I explain in my book, as a principle, people dying in the fighting is the marker that almost certainly signifies the progression to the next and more violent civil war stage. But Dalio, people were already dying in Palestine and Israel. There was already bombs going off for years before this. But this is just to an extreme degree what's happened. Anyway, he continues, which will continue until the winners and losers are clearly determined. It is unlikely that this Israel-Hamas war will be limited to Israel and the Gaza Strip, and likely that it will continue until one side clearly wins over the other. It is also likely that the wars involving Israel, Hamas, Ukraine, and Russia will have big effects on the ongoing great power conflicts, and it is very likely that Hamas acted with support from more powerful countries. In other words, we should recognize that these two hot wars are not just between the parties directly involved in them. These wars are part of the bigger, great power conflicts to shape the new world order, and they will have big effects on the countries who are allies and enemies of the four sides in these two seemingly irreconcilable wars. These two wars will cost the allies of these countries a lot. For example, the US is now fighting proxy wars in Europe and the Middle East while preparing for war in East Asia. As these wars, is he talking about preparing for war in East Asia? What's East Asia? Is that China? As these wars spread, they will cost more. Yep. And obviously, what does that mean when these wars cost more? What are they going to do? They're going to print money. What happens when they print money? Inflation. Fortunately, the progression towards a world war between the biggest powers, the US and China, has not yet crossed the irreversible line from being containable, which it is now, to becoming a brutal war between the biggest powers and their allies. If these major powers do have direct fighting with each other, in which one side kills a significant number of people on the other side, we will see the transition from contained pre-hot war conflicts to a brutal World War III. Well, luckily China's not really involved in the current two smaller wars, the Ukraine-Russia and the Israel-Hamas war. To push the point home, I want to make clear that I believe that we are in the brief part of the big cycle when the conflicts are heating up and the leading powers still have the ability to choose between crossing that line into brutal war or pulling back from the brink. Because the one thing that we know about wars is that they never go as expected and they are more brutal than they are expected to be. In fact, so much more brutal than expected that even those who were most boldly in favor of having the wars regretted having them. Yeah, so all of those pundits, all of those people talking about, I hate this party here, I hate this. And when war actually takes place, it's so bad, it's so brutal that I'm sure they regret that. I hope that the leaders of the great powers will wisely step back from the brink, even while they must prepare to be strong enough to successfully fight and win a hot war. In my opinion, this will go well. Not only will the restraint of the participants be tested, but alliances that are prone to draw in non-fighting parties will also be tested. That is because being allied and helpful to the allied countries in these brutal wars is always very costly and raises the risks of being drawn fully into the war. That's how local wars spread into world wars. Now, let's remember the other four. I'm going to skip a bit of this. Okay, what can be done to improve things? Because this is the solution for Dalio, which I found quite interesting. Rather than just describing what I think is going on and what might happen as accurately as I can, I will also offer a few suggestions of things that can be done to make things better. In my recent post, when I look at the internal conflict issue in the US, don't need to talk about that. Everyone knows there's crazy amount of internal conflict going on in the US. I shared my pipe dream that a strong bipartisan leader would emerge to become president, have a bipartisan cabinet, and create a bipartisan commission of smart folks from both sides to re-engineer the system to produce much broader based productivity and prosperity that is built on sound finances and investments. Imagine that. Imagine if we can just focus on building things, growing things, developing cool technology like Steve Jobs did, and actually coming to solutions instead of saying you're the devil, you're the worst person there is, and I'm so much better than you. So that's what bipartisan is. When you're not really a part of, you're not really head on towards either side. A full Republican, no matter what the issue is, I'll be full Republican. Same with full Democrat. Nah, you're kind of willing to step back, take a look at things, and not really be fully on either side. Not really an extremist. I realize that this won't happen. Well, you never know, Dalio. Have a bit of hope. There are some good candidates coming up. I think there are some people who aren't, a partisan hack, as they say. So I shared my more attainable hope that moderates from both parties openly state that they are willing to work in a bipartisan way and create a bipartisan voting bloc that is strong enough to deliver the swing votes that determine outcomes. I believe in this path because I believe that there is not a big move towards strong bipartisanship that leads to big, smart reforms that bring about broad-based productivity and income gains. There's likely to be some form of debilitating civil war. Well, that's the last thing the US need is a civil war when, China have done so well over the past 10 years. They're catching up. Some say they've almost caught up in terms of GDP, depending on the way that you measure it. We don't need a civil war. As I also explained in that post, in order to reduce the risk of debilitating civil war taking place, I believe that having different people to be able to pursue their different preferred approaches to life by going to the states that are most aligned with their preferred approaches will help relieve the tension. So he's saying, well, you can go to a democratic state or a state that is run by Republicans, and so this helps people not want to fight, so they can just move to a different state that shares their same viewpoints. Okay, now he's sharing his solutions to what's going on. I will now share with you my pipe dream that is not attainable and my more attainable hope for what will happen to deal with international conflicts that are bringing us to the brink of a hot world war. My pipe dream would be to have world leaders recognize that having hot wars is the worst possible thing to happen, and that working together on creating a path and processes for minimizing the chances of hot war developing is the best thing they can do. Yeah, I would love to see that, just talks between the different leaders of different nations on how can we bring about peace. Imagine if that was the conversation. How can we bring about peace? How can we focus on growing our own economies? How can we avoid war? How can we try unite ourselves a bit more in a common goal, instead of saying, this is my side and this is what you're doing wrong? That would be great. But Dalio calls that a pipe dream. My more attainable stretched goal would be for the US and China to jointly broker peace in Ukraine. While that is a stretch goal, it might be attainable as conditions are ripening for this to happen. Imagine if the two leading and opposing world powers that are currently lining the sides up for a hot war join forces to deliver peace. That would be sick. Imagine USA and China just say, okay guys, Russia, Ukraine, just calm down. Let's find a way to make a solution. Russia, you get this. Ukraine, you get this. No more fighting. That would be a beautiful solution, because also, if that happens, it will minimize the chances of a hot war between the worst hot war that could happen, arguably, would be the USA and China having a hot war. So if they can broker and deliver a peace, then that's going to make it way less likely for the two major powers to have a hot war. That would be shockingly terrific, because besides delivering peace, it would reduce the risks of the Russia-Ukraine war leading to worse wars, and would also show that they could work together for peace. If they did that, maybe they could develop a dynamic that would bring about peace rather than conflict in other cases. Imagine how great an alliance in pursuit of world peace between the two greatest opposing countries would be. As always, I will keep you updated as events unfold. Stay tuned. Now, just give me 10 minutes. I'm just going to read through all the disclosures. Bridgewater Daily Observations. Just kidding. Okay. 1 minute. Coffee break. If anyone wants to leave their opinion, what do you think? Do you think Dalio is right? A 50% chance of this Hamas Israel war leading to a broader war between the two major powers, a broader hot war. Listen, well, he didn't necessarily say the two major powers. He just said between bigger powers. A hot war between the bigger powers. But 50%, like that's like a flick of the coin. Like, that is so high. I don't see that happening. I think there's gonna be a different sort of solution. I hope it just remains between the two countries and we don't see war in the bigger nations, because that could end very badly, especially with all of the technology that we have these days, all of the, obviously, nuclear technology. I know we've had nuclear for a long time now, but yeah, we've got that. But also, just think about all the other technology, like drones. We can get drones that can shoot people. If there is a world war, I'd hate to see what it's like with all of the technology and all the bombing as well. Like, what? So we can just die just from like staying in our apartments just by a bomb sent from, you know, another country. So with all the technology, World War III would obviously be terrible. Now, I just want to show you a post from Dalio, well, not from Dalio, but from someone following Dalio on where we are in the economic cycle. And then I'm going to show you Dalio's approach to how, because obviously this is about investing, guys. I didn't actually want to talk about wars and stuff like that. It's just because Dalio, he's a famous economist, and he's made this big claim that there's a 50% chance. I had to mention this, but let's focus on investing. Let's focus on the economy. How can we prepare? Where are we in the economic cycle? Coffee, 2 sugars, always does the trick. So, according to Ray Dalio, we are at number 15. I don't know who this guy is. I don't know if we can trust the source. Where did Dalio say we are at number 15? But guys, this is the cycle, they say. So it starts with the first stage where things are good, you're growing, you're productive, you have strong leadership, you're inventing things, education is great, culture is great, we all work together. Good resource allocation, good competitiveness, we're competing, who can be the best company, we're growing. Stage 7, strong income growth, strong markets and financial centers. Dalio says we've already gone through all of this. But then the top starts to come. We slowly become a bit lazy, less productive. We've got all of these great companies. We've got, everything's working well. Let's sit back. Let's throw some parties. Let's relax, That's 9. We relax a bit. Less productive. Then we overextend. Then we lose competitiveness. There's other nations coming that are competing against us. Their technology is competing against us. They're offering cheaper prices for a good product. We lose competitiveness. And then the wealth gaps come. The rich get crazy rich, and the poor, they're still pretty good, but the rich are just so much more ahead of the poor. That's the wealth gaps, and that's what we're seeing today, I don't need to go over it. We all know how rich the rich are. I'm not trying to hate on them or anything, but Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, they got billions and billions and billions of dollars, and some people struggle to make 40K a year or whatever. So there's these big wealth gaps. We're past this stage. Large debts, yes. I mean, look at the USA debt. USA debt. USA are currently in a lot of debt right now. This is total public debt, but we've seen how much it shot up from 2008 to 2023, from 10 trillion, I think that is, to 32 trillion. That is what we've got currently. A lot of debt in the economy right now. Printing money. We have had a lot of printing money lately with obviously the pandemic and also 2008 housing crash. There was a lot of printing of money. We saw inflation increase a lot, but it's not ridiculous printing of money. It's not like Argentina where they printed so much they have like 50% inflation or 100% inflation, whatever they have. So some people were arguing, I remember in the comments, saying that Ray Dalio actually thinks we're at stage 14 because the printing hasn't really started yet. We're not like Zimbabwe where they just printed so much they just wrecked the currency. USA currency is still pretty good right now. Everyone still likes the USA dollar. He says it will be glorious for a while. So we're either at stage 14 or 15. Well, 15, internal conflict. We know there's a lot of internal conflict, but there's not, direct fighting. There's just talking back and forth. So that's kind of where I guess we are in the cycle, which is the decline stage. We're starting the decline stage. But I want to talk a bit more about how to prepare for, wars and, a struggling economy and situations that might be considered crazy. And I'm going to talk about Dalio's approach, and then I'm going to talk about my approach, which is more similar to Warren Buffett. So Dalio has what he calls an all-weather portfolio, where he's diversified his portfolio across a bunch of different assets to protect himself no matter what happens to the economy. No matter if the economy shoots up or if there's a recession, a depression. This is his way of protecting himself no matter what's going to happen. He calls it the all-weather portfolio. If it's raining, sunny, doesn't matter. It's going to be fine. Ten people watching. Hello, 10 people. Thank you for watching. I think this is like the most I've ever had. Second live stream on YouTube. I like live streaming more because, you know, it's just more fun, you know, actually just doing it live and, you know, not like scripting something out. It's just more natural, I guess. So I really like live streaming. So this is Dalio's all-weather portfolio, guys. I just need to bring it up on the other screen. First of all, 30% in stocks. That's not actually that much, eh? Only 30% in stocks? That's not my approach, I'll tell you that. But this is Dalio's all-weather approach. So 30% in stocks, and so a way to show that is through the index fund VTI. So 30% in VTI. VTI is the Vanguard Total Stock Market ETF. Seeks to track the performance of the US Total Market Index. So basically it's an index for almost the entire USA market. If you own this ETF, you're going to get similar results to the entire USA stock market. Large, mid, and small cap equities. Equity just means stocks. Diversified across growth and value styles. So it's very diversified. Employs a passively managed index sampling strategy. So it remains fully invested and low expenses, which Vanguard is pretty good for. So he has 30% of the portfolio in this fund. That's the all-weather strategy. So I just wanted to just show you an example of the type of stocks that he has. So this is the type of sectors that they're in, which is essentially, it's probably close to the overall USA market, I'd guess. A lot of consumer discretionary, financials, healthcare, 10%, industrials, 10%, a lot of technology. So that's obviously stocks like Apple, Nvidia, Meta, I'd assume. 30% technology. These are the type of sectors, and these are the holdings. So yeah, Apple, how do we get rid of that? Apple, 6%, Microsoft. So it's a lot of those big name stocks. Nvidia, 2%, Alphabet, Tesla, Meta, Berkshire, Alphabet, Class C. So yeah, it's a lot of those big name stocks, and it's going to be diversified across a bunch of different equities, like probably hundreds and hundreds. So that just gives you a view. He's basically 30% in these types of companies. So 30% in stocks, not that much. Then fixed income. So 40% in US long-term fixed income, aka the equity, the ticker symbol TLT, which I've got over here, which is the iShares 20-year Treasury bond ETF. So a bond basically is when you give money to the government for 20 years and they say, okay, each year we'll give you a 4% dividend on that bond, a 4% payment or coupon they call it on that bond. So, and then at the end of the bond, you get your money back. So this bond is for 20 years. Imagine giving your money to the government for 20 years. Not my strategy. The yield on that is 3.5%. So 20 years and you get a 3.5% return. And you have 40% of your portfolio in it. Yeah, that's Dalio's strategy. Then he has 20% in intermediate term bonds, which is just 3 to 7 year bonds. So that's like loaning your money to the government for 3 to 7 years and getting a 2% return essentially each year. Again, very low return, but they are considered safe, but you do get a very low return. So yeah, 15% in intermediate, 40% in long term, 30% in stocks. Then you've got the commodities. So a commodity is just, I guess you consider them essential things, or they're often essential things that are needed, that are, I believe they're called fungible. They can easily be replaced from one to another. So this is the commodity one, right? Yeah, so this is the Commodity Index Tracking Fund, which Dalio says 7.5%. This fund is designed for investors who want a cost-effective and convenient way to invest in commodity futures. So here's some of the things you'll own if you buy this fund. Here's some of the commodities that he's talking about. So oil, a lot of oil, like 10% in this oil, 10% in that Brent crude, 12% in gasoline. Then you got natural gas here, sugar, another commodity. So these are the type of things that are obviously going to perform in no matter what market we're in, at least perform to some degree, because I don't care if there's a recession, a depression, a world war, we're still going to need wheat. We're still going to need to eat. We're still going to need bread. We're going to need corn, sugar, soybeans, gold and silver. These are other commodities. These are other things that are considered safe in a market crash and in times of panic. You got aluminium, you got zinc. So yeah, 7.5% in all of these types of commodities. That's the all-weather portfolio to be prepared for no matter what happens, no matter if there is a hot war between the major superpowers. And then 7.5% in gold. Dalio, he is bit of a gold buff. I remember one of the quotes he said was he recommends every portfolio to have 5 to 10% in gold. And gold was considered the major currency. Even like 100 years ago, every US dollar had to be backed by a portion of gold. And then obviously they cut off gold from the US dollar, and then they just started printing massive amounts of the US dollar. But gold throughout so much of history has been used as a currency and has been considered a safe haven. So this is just an ETF that holds gold. It's just essentially an easy way of holding gold. SPDR Gold Trust. Offers investors relatively cost-efficient and secure way to access the gold market. Yeah, so it's just an easy way of holding gold, essentially. So there you go, 7.5% in gold, 7.5% in commodities, 15% in intermediate-term bonds, and 40% in long-term bonds. So that's 55% of a portfolio in bonds, like intermediate and long-term bonds, where they're only giving you a 2% to 4% type return. That's not a whole lot. It's not my strategy. It's Dalio's all-weather strategy. And then you got 30% in stocks. So my approach is a little bit more what I'd say Buffett-like, where I like to just own stocks throughout most of the time. No matter what's happening, I like stocks. The reason is because stocks are the major asset class that have performed the best across history, and stocks are just businesses. So even in periods of war, no matter what's happening in terms of, the economy or politics or countries fighting, stocks, aka businesses, are still going to be around, still going to be producing things. Some more than others though. And so I've got here strategies for investing in war times. I don't want to directly talk about, profiting from war stocks or how we can make money from a war, because I just don't want to talk about that. I don't really want to make money in that way. I just don't know if it's ethical or not. I haven't really thought it through. I just don't want to make money in that way. Like, listen, if I make, 100% return by investing in whatever war type company, some company that's producing, airplanes for war or producing guns, will I feel happy? Will I feel good even if I make a lot of money, 100% return, $50,000? No. So I'm not going to talk about profiting from war stocks in this video. But I do want to, think, how can we be safe? I don't want to like lose, 60% of my money, 70% of money. I want to keep my money relatively in things that I know are going to do well for the long term. So here's some strategies of mine, and a lot of it is based around what Warren Buffett does. Give me 1 second. So one is own what I call fundamental stocks that are needed no matter what's happening in the economy. So these are stocks like food companies. Doesn't matter what's happening, if there's a war, whatever's happening, we're still going to need food. We're still going to need McDonald's to make burgers because we still need to eat. We still need Costco. So these types of companies are still going to, be selling things, going to make income, going to make profit no matter what's happening. Even if there is a hot war, even if that 50% chance that Dalio says happens, you want to own stocks that have a good business model. Energy companies like Exxon, Chevron. We still need oil in a war. Even more so in a war, we need more oil. We need more energy to produce all of these, war. It sounds a bit wrong, but yeah, to produce, the oil that is needed in planes and war vehicles and to move the soldiers. And you still need a drive in wars. I mean, yeah, energy companies are still going to make money and no matter what happens. Basic materials, utility industry, these types of industries are going to perform no matter what's happening. And one thing I will say is watch out for the luxurious type of companies because when times are hard, when we start to struggle, these luxury brands and these somewhat unnecessary products, they will start to struggle and struggle to make income. The likes of like Gucci. We're not going to be thinking like, oh, I want to buy a Gucci t-shirt for $10,000 when a war's going on and we don't have that much money. These are the types of things that are going to struggle a lot if we see, a war or a major recession, or even companies like Ferraris or very expensive vehicles. Those companies will struggle. So just think about all of the stocks you own, think about their businesses and how will those businesses perform if times get tough. And also another thing is don't necessarily think that stocks as a whole will go bad if there is a war, because when a war happens, we need our economy to work. It's often when a war happens, it stimulates our economy. I had a look at what the stock market did in World War II. I'll show you again. So World War II was 1939 to 1945. Let's see what happened to the stock market in that time. So, yeah, let's see. 1939, September was World War II. Don't want to know about that. And the S&P 500 was at 284. And then the war happened. The stock market crashed, but then it went back up. And by the end of the war, it was the war ended in September 1945. It was 274 points. So at the start of the war and at the end of the war, the stock market was at the same point. So a lot of people think, oh, war happens, the whole market's going to crash. Not necessarily. A lot of these luxury brands will crash. A lot of these companies with bad business models will crash and maybe go bankrupt. As Warren Buffett says, when the tide goes out, you discover who's swimming naked. But if you got the stocks with good quality business models, good management, selling needed items, you're probably going to be fine. As I said, gold can sometimes be considered a safe haven. A lot of people will talk about, own gold if times get tough. I don't mind owning a bit of gold in my portfolio, but I never like to have a lot of gold in my portfolio because gold does not produce anything. Stocks will always be producing things like McDonald's will be making burgers, selling burgers, helping people eat. Whatever it is, they'll be producing something. But gold essentially does just sit there. It doesn't do anything productive. And that's why over the long term, stocks have just completely outperformed gold. So that's why I like to own stocks as opposed to a lot of gold. My strategy is in some ways very similar to Warren Buffett. Just own good quality businesses, pay cheap prices for them with good underlying businesses. And if you do that smartly, you're going to be fine no matter what happens. Now, I want to end the stream on this because a lot of people a lot of people worry a lot, in my opinion. But Warren Buffett, the ultimate sort of rationalist, or maybe you could say that Charlie Munger is even more rational, but Buffett's pretty good. I think we can say that. My thing is, don't overly panic too much about money. Yes, make sure you're prepared. Yes, make sure you've got a portfolio of stocks with good business models. And yes, that's important. Obviously, you should be prepared now for no matter what happens in the market. I've showed you Dalio's approach. I've showed you my approach and kind of Buffett's approach too. But let's just end the stream on this. 1 second. Buffett said, in the 20th century, the United States endured 2 world wars and other traumatic and expensive military conflicts. It endured the Depression, a dozen or so recessions and financial panics, oil shocks, a flu epidemic, and the resignation of a disgraced president. Yet the Dow rose from 66 to 11,497. So what is that? The Dow rose by 200 times the amount or something around that. Even though there was all of this panic, all of these crazy things going on, 2 world wars, president resigning, a depression, a recession, financial panics, oil shocks, but the stock market still went up by 200 times the amount. So that just shows you, even if people are talking about, wars and fearful things and the world's going to end, don't overly panic. Make sure you own good quality stocks, because the stock market over the long term always basically goes up. And that's because stocks are businesses. Stocks produce things. And I don't want to say stocks make the world go around, but businesses make the world go round in a way. They produce things, they help people live, they give jobs. So you want to be an owner of businesses. Don't overly give in to panic, but just be rational about things and be prepared. And I don't know, what's your strategy? Just at least think of a strategy. Do you, are you going to just hold cash? Do you think cash is the approach? Do you think gold's the approach? I've told you my strategy. I've showed you Dalio's strategy, but at least write it down. Like, if this happens, this is what I'm doing, and this is why it's going to work well. I think that's the important thing. Just be prepared no matter what's happening. Guys, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. And yeah, all the best.